Right, we're going to get into a bit of technology. They always reveal. But this week, multiple federal government agencies, including the US Treasury and Commerce departments, have had some of their computer systems breached as part of a widespread global cyber espionage campaign believed to be the work of the Russian government. According to officials and people familiar with the matter. And Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service is suspected of being behind the hacks of the US government networks, in which some of the internal communications are believed to have been stolen, and the operation is related to a cyber breach disclosed last week of US-based cybersecurity firm FireEye. Just change the R for a V, and you got FireEye. While those familiar with the hack couldn't precisely specify its scope or the resultant damage to the US government, several described it as amongst the most potentially worrisome cyber attacks in years, because it may have allowed Russia to access sensitive information from government agencies, defense contractors, and other industries. What a load of bollocks that is. Except there's just one problem with that. Except American agencies work with and share all data with the KGB. So that's bollocks. Now, one person familiar with the matter said the campaign was a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. Ooh, guess he went to the Johns Hopkins Math Center then. In terms of its likely severity and national security implications. The question is, was it a hack or a restructure plan I was aware of a week last Saturday? Things could get real interesting following that. Time will tell, as always. And here is another of their play on words and seducement programs related to technology. A hybrid cloud, perhaps done by hybrid people or hybrid beings. So how does a hybrid cloud work? Well, with traditional hybrid cloud architecture, initially, hybrid cloud architecture focused on the mechanics of transforming portions of a company's on-premises data center then into a private cloud infrastructure, and then connecting that infrastructure to public cloud environments hosted off-premises by a public cloud provider, for example, AWS, Google Cloud Services, IBM Marduk Cloud, Microsoft Azure. And this was accomplished, they say, using a pre-packaged hybrid cloud solution such as Red Hat OpenStack. And the link resides outside of IBM, or by using sophisticated enterprise middleware to integrate cloud resources across the environments and unified management tools for monitoring, allocating, and managing those resources from, quote, a central console or a single pane of glass, unquote. Central console or single pane of glass is the same technology in the Basegi Mountains. Holographic screen technology. And given the original meaning for a cloud was a mass of rock or hill, perhaps that makes sense. The original meaning for a cloud was a mass of rock or a hill. Now, figuratively, cloud means something that obscures, darkens, threatens, or casts a shadow. Indeed. Now, as part of the next critical step in their digital transformations, organizations are building new applications and modernizing legacy applications to leverage cloud-native technologies that enable consistent and reliable development, deployment, management, and performance across cloud environments and also across cloud vendors. At a higher level, public and private cloud are no longer physical locations to connect. Public and private cloud are no longer physical locations to connect. For example, they say many cloud vendors now offer public cloud services that run in their customers' on-premises data centers. Private clouds, once run exclusively on premises, are now often hosted in off-premises data centers on virtual private networks, VPNs. Some people say that that's getting round the privacy. No. Or virtual private clouds, VPCs, or on dedicated infrastructure that is rented from third-party providers, and they say who are sometimes also the public cloud providers, which means new boss, same as the old boss, as all the same companies are running it. Is it a cloud or in the clouds is the great question. If it's in the clouds, who is running it? Is it people on Earth premises or people off Earth premises? They mentioned Red Hat. Red Hat is open source, and so a NATO CIA venture. But here is what it also means. Red Hat, 1. Roman Catholic Church, the broad-rimmed crimson hat given to cardinals as the symbol of their rank and office. 2. Roman Catholic Church, the rank and official office of a cardinal. And they are created in consistories by the Pope, and one of their foremost duties is the election of a new Pope, invariably from amongst themselves, or in-house. In-house being the operative word, although it's not a formal requirement when the Holy See is vacant, following the death or the resignation of the reigning pontiff. And the most senior cardinal priest of the college is termed the proto-priest. And so is a Cohen. It's not a red hat, but a red flag. Now, as part of this new cloud computing, they come up with this. What is serverless computing? And this is their own manual. Serverless is an approach to computing that offloads responsibility for a common infrastructure management task, for example, scaling, scheduling, patching, and provisioning, to cloud providers and tools, allowing engineers to focus their time and effort on the business logic specific to their applications or process. And the most useful way to define and understand serverless is focusing on the handful of core attributes that distinguish serverless computing from other compute models. Namely, the serverless model requires no management and operation of infrastructure, which then enables developers to focus more narrowly on code, custom business logic. So what they're saying to you there is, and that is the seducement, it saves time. Because it's AI. Serverless computing runs code only on demand on a per-request basis, scaling transparently with the number of requests being served. Serverless computing enables end users to pay only for resources being used and never paying for idle capacity. That's the next seducement. Look at what it saves you. Serverless is fundamentally about spending more time on code and less on infrastructure. And the biggest controversy associated with serverless computing is not around its value, use cases, or which vendor offerings are the right fit for which jobs, but rather the name itself. And the ongoing argument around serverless is that the name is not appropriate because there are still servers in serverless computing. Really? So it's not serverless then, is it? Why the name serverless has persisted is because the name is describing an end user's experience. In a technology that is described as serverless, the management needs of the underlying servers are invisible to the end user. Invisible to the end user. They're not on premises anymore, they're off premises. And they said the servers are still there, you just don't see them or interact with them. To the vast majority of people, it is serverless anyway. Only a few know where are the servers and less know who runs them. So to the average user, all computing is serverless. But this is something very different. And it's all very open source, that to me. And what it confirms is they are building a new one, because their old systems went down. Now, perhaps the right term for these clouds are cloud cuckoo land, which generally means people are a bit nuts or fanciful. But perhaps the original description may make more sense. Cloud cuckoo land. Imaginary city built in the air, like a cloud. 1830, translating Aristophanes' play in The Birds, 414 BCE. Cloudland, place above the earth or away from the practical things of life. Dreamland and the realm of fantasy is attested from 1840. Floating cities, anyone? Avatar? What about the floating in mid-air island off northwest Africa reported by the US military? Floating cities can also be space stations. Just saying. The question is, who or what is in them? A robot surgeon has removed a tumour weighing 5 kilograms from a 44-year-old woman's ovaries in the past week. And the complicated surgery conducted at Al-Qasimi Hospital for Women and Children in Sharjah used the Da Vinci robotic surgical system that performs minimally invasive surgery with advanced set of instruments and a 3D high-definition view of the surgical area. Now, the procedure was initiated by Dr. Labib Riashi, reconstructive surgery and robotic gynecological specialist and member of the American Board of Female Pelvic Medicine, with the help of Al-Qasimi Hospital gynecologists. Now, the painless, it is said, surgery was done through a small 2-centimetre opening in the abdomen, and patient was sent home within 24 hours without complication and with minimal pain compared to traditional surgeries. And this was explained by one of the doctors who was part of the team. Dr. Mohammed Salim Al-Olamah Mohab, Under-Secretary and Head of the Board of Directors of the Emirates Health Services Corporation, said the ministry is keen in harnessing the latest robots to conduct surgeries and was doing its utmost to double its achievements in the artificial intelligence field. At which point does it become more obvious? This is in line with the wise directives of the United Arab Emirates government, who just normalised ties with Israel. And no, it's not a coincidence, which is seeking to become a hub of incorporating AI in health services in the Middle East for performing robotic surgeries, he said. What a way to bring in robot staff by first injecting all of the frontline nurse staff, is it not? Ponder on that. But it's kind of interesting they use Da Vinci for its name, given it was not the proper name for who we know as Leonardo. His real name was not Leon, but Lion, as in Leonardo di Ser Piero. Da Vinci was not the surname, it was the name of the province he came from, Vinci. So, I was looking up Da Vinci, and there was a number of anomalies in some of his paintings and drawings. And the Last Supper picture of which he is famous for, carries two obvious anomalies upon closer inspection. One, there is glass cups on the table. Was the glass cups available at that time? No. Certainly not clear glass anyway. And two, why is Mary Magdalene carrying a knife and one of the alleged disciples holding her arm to stop her using it? Go and check it out yourself. Now, Leonardo grew up in the Medici-owned province and was connected to the Medicis in more ways than one. Court records of 1476, when he was aged 24, show that Leonardo and three other young men were charged with sodomy in an incident involving a well-known male prostitute. Now, the charges were dismissed for lack of evidence, and there is speculation that since one of the accused, Leonardo di Tornabuoni, was related to Lorenzo di Medici. The Medicis, black nobility, and the family exerted its influence to secure the dismissal. You see, it's always been just us, not just is. We're now going to go into some COVID. And there's going to be a few different levels, some of it positive. Well, quite a bit actually. But here we go with the race issue again. They're now using race as an agenda for the COVID. And yet again, the targets are the so-called white privileged. What an oxymoron that is. And it says the university allows students exemptions for medical and religious reasons, as well as people of colour who are concerned about fulfilling the requirements. And the Ivy League college, Cornell University, implemented a flu vaccination requirement for all students during the fall of 2020 semester, but allowed for minority student exemptions based on historical injustices and current events. Historical injustices and current events. And through a behavioural compact, the collection of schools known as the Ivy League required students attending the Cornell to receive a flu shot as a public health strategy in response to COVID. What has flu got to do with COVID? I guess nobody asks that common sense question. And then they said exemptions applied only for medical or religious reasons, along with concerns from black, indigenous and other people of colour. I guess white is no longer considered a colour, or so it seems. Students who identify as black, indigenous or a person of colour may have personal concerns about fulfilling the compact requirements based on historical injustices and also current events. We recognise that due to long-standing systemic racism and health inequities in this country, individuals from some marginalised communities may have concerns about needing to agree to such requirements. Students at the school in Ithaca, New York, can apply for an exemption to the required vaccines. However, the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous and Person of Colour, exemption to the flu vaccine does not explain a requirement that must be met in order for the exemption to be approved. And Cornell explained why some groups may feel sceptical agreeing to the flu shot requirement, and repeated again, historically the bodies of Black, Indigenous and other peoples of colour have been mistreated and used by people in power, sometimes for profit or medical gain. Yet another school-based institution that doesn't know its arse from its elbow. And it's no wonder no one understands anything much in this country if these people are the top of the knowledge tree. Perhaps the Ivy League can explain why only one colour of people is vanishing rapidly on this planet, the whites, whilst the population of all other colours have exploded in the past 100 years. 30% of the world's demographic 100 years ago, now down to 9% and only 3/4 of a billion left. If it doesn't become more obvious by now what is going on, I don't know what is. We'll find out more on that in a future show. It's almost ready. It's going to prove everything. If ever there was an overview of THI and the TPC in one show, the next must listen to show is it. I may leave it to the beginning of the new year, but it could also go out next Tuesday. We'll see. President Trump, now known as the vaccine president for bots, lashed out this week at the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, in a Friday morning tweet attacking the agency's commissioner, Dr. Stephen M. Hahn, by name for not approving a COVID-19 vaccine faster. Really. It takes 10 to 25 years. They've done it in under a year, which is fake. And Trump wanted it faster. Which was continuing his practice of publicly upbraiding subordinates with whom he is displeased. Mr. Trump told Dr. Hahn to stop playing games and start saving lives. Yeah, touche, Mr. Trump. And he called the FDA the big old slow turtle flush with funds but mired in bureaucracy. Dear me. Has Trump not seen anything in the American government? Because I think he's just described it, a big old slow turtle flush with funds and mired in bureaucracy. And hypocrisy as well. And he said the FDA has been walking a thin line trying to fast-track vaccine approval without undercutting public confidence in the process. And Dr. Hahn has repeatedly said regulators will not approve a vaccine that has not been proven safe and effective. Well, the same afternoon they approved it. And the president's tirade came the morning after an outside advisory panel of experts voted overwhelmingly. Experts voting? Really, jackasses. To recommend that the FDA regulators approve a vaccine developed by Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech for emergency use. And the regulators were expected to issue the authorization as early as Friday, and in a statement on Friday said it put the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and those involved with Operation Warp Speed on notice, so they can, here they go again, they've used this one word consistently through their broadcasts, so they can execute their plans for a timely vaccine distribution. A reminder of what is Operation Warp Speed. Operation Warp Speed is a US deep state project to facilitate at an unprecedented pace and expense the development, manufacturing and distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine to the entire US population by January 2021. Good luck with that. And a significant number of military personnel is utilised in this effort. On April 30th, 2020, the Trump administration announced a, quote, Manhattan Project style, unquote, effort to drastically cut the time needed to develop a coronavirus vaccine. Now, the Manhattan Project was to develop nuclear weapons. From nuclear weapons to unclear weapons, Mr. Trump. Operation Warp Speed is the brainchild of the presidential advisor and snake-in-law, Jared Kushner. Well, I never. And it is being formally run by the Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar and Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who was later fired, who will work with a new vaccine czar. We'll have more about that shortly. A vaccine czar selected for Kushner's Operation Warp Speed is former GlaxoSmithKline chairman of its vaccines division, the Moroccan-born US citizen Dr. Moncef Slaoui. 60 military officials, including at least 4 generals, all black son, are involved in the leadership of Operation Warp Speed, many of whom have never worked in healthcare or vaccine development. Does that make any sense? Just 29 of the roughly 90 leaders on the chart aren't employed by the DoD, and most of those work for the Department of Health and Human Services and also its sub-agencies. Now, normally it takes a vaccine 10 years to 25 years to develop due to safety tests, but in this case, big pharma companies have been fully indemnified by the US government against liabilities should vaccine recipients die or develop serious disease as a result of the hyper-rushed vaccine. 14 promising candidates have been chosen from the 100-plus vaccine candidates. So what normally takes 10 to 25 years, suddenly within a year, 100-plus vaccine candidates have come forward. Really? And some of them are already in clinical trials with US government support, which will be reduced to 3 to 5 in the end. In April 2020, the leading US government candidate for winning the Warp Speed race to roll out COVID-19 vaccine was Slaoui's Moderna Inc., Mode RNA. So the person that Trump appointed as part of the task force was one of the vaccine manufacturers. On April 16, Mode RNA got an award from the US government agency BARDA for $483 million to accelerate development of the mRNA, Mode RNA, which is a gene editing vaccine technology that is entirely experimental and has never before approved for use as a vaccine. I'm going to repeat that again. mRNA 1273M, a gene-edited vaccine technology that is entirely experimental and has never before approved for use as a vaccine. Dr. Slaoui also has ties to the projects of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Just saying. He sat on the board of the Gates-funded International AIDS Vaccine Initiative. And we've heard about the HIV in the vaccines, have we not? The IAVI was initiated in 1994, International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, by the Rockefeller Foundation, who just happened to be the same foundation that started Project Lockstep back in 2010, and is backed amongst others by the Gates Foundation, by the US Department of Defense, and by Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Johnson & Johnson, which Mr. Trump mentioned, remember, which hopes to begin trials of its most promising potential vaccine at least by the first week of September 2020, announced that it struck a deal with the intelligence-connected company Emergent Biosolutions of Maryland to mass-produce its product. The intelligence-connected company in Maryland. Hello, CIA again. And the US Congress directed almost $10 billion to this effort through supplemental funding, including the CARES Act. Yeah, they don't care. And Congress has appropriated other flexible funding. It's funny they're not appropriating flexible funding for the people whose taxes they have hold of. No. Over $6.5 billion has been designated by the US Congress for countermeasure development through the Biomedical Advanced Research and Developmental Authority, BARDA, along with $3 billion for NIH research, which Mr. Fauci is connected to. So instead of entering into contracts directly with vaccine makers, more than $6 billion in Operation Warp Speed funding has been routed through a defense contract management firm called Advanced Technologies International, Inc. ATI then awarded contracts to companies working on COVID-19 vaccines. So ATI is the middleman. They collect the funds. It's a bit like the Pentagon. The Pentagon was given X amount, say $500 billion from the US government, and half of it went out the back door. Same thing. Everyone takes a piece of the pie. And as a result, the contracts between the pharmaceutical companies and ATI may not be available through public records requests. That's in case you find out the skullduggery and who's involved. It's the CIA. And additional documents are exempt from public disclosure for the next 5 years. Exempt for the next 5 years. The US federal government is making investments in manufacturing and distribution at its own risk much earlier than usual, giving the firms the knowledge that they can invest aggressively in the development. And the The key in that is the word investments. Trump said it in a short speech last week, did he not? They are profiting off a fake illness they created and subsequently a fake virus. And my information I received this week is the fake virus was started and created in France and transported to Wuhan. COVID-19 was made in France by French scientists at the Institut Pasteur from natural SARS-CoV, then transferred to Wuhan, where the people of Institut Pasteur released it, unbeknownst to scientists in the Wuhan laboratory and the Chinese government. Now remember our intel from March, April of the stronger variant of this virus, fake as it is, being released in France and Panama. And I suspect this is what they are describing. COVID was in many countries before Wuhan, with links to Harvard, as we revealed earlier. And not one country is involved in it, but several countries. And this was a coordinated attack. A bit of intel. There's a bit of intel just there as well. The hidden war now is back in full flow. And some interesting developments on that side of things have been revealed in various differing confirmations this week. The skullduggery planned this and next week appears to have been addressed, and some real interesting developments could arise before the year's end or early into the new year. I will reveal details and more when safe to do so, so please do not ask me on the who, what or why of that ilk, as I will not answer them. Unlike other shows, I don't seek sensations. Now, one thing you may have to be aware of is to expect a major false flag event in one or more countries, as they are losing the narrative on this COVID badly, and will